Honey, have you seen my gray miniskirt? This question may seem quite innocuous to you, but it was actually the first salvo of the war. Let me backtrack a bit and explain. I have been married to Melanie, a third grade teacher, for several years now. We had a great marriage before that. And then Tanner happened again. Tanner was my wife's longtime ex-boyfriend. To me, he was just a name. In July, he was back in town for a short-term job and asked to call Melanie. My bitchy sister-in-law, Beth, gave him all her contact info. In fact, in retrospect, you can tell she took a certain amount of pleasure in it. Beth told me I had to be careful because Tanner and Mel were pretty close. So when Mel asked if I would have lunch with him, I, like a big fool, agreed. By the way, my wife started seeing Tanner almost every day during long lunches at his job while she was on summer vacation. After a month or so, she came to me and confessed. Apparently, they had had a very long, very passionate relationship, which he had cut short when he got a job far away from here. He left her, and she was devastated for a long time. She started to get her life together, dating someone serious again. Then Tanner came over for a week and ruined that relationship after she partied with him for 3 days straight. Eventually, she met and married me. Needless to say, I didn't know any of the story until she confessed to me, telling me that she was having fun with anyone. We had been fighting. I wanted to know what she was up to. She refused to promise to stop having fun with him. He was perfect. She swore she didn't want to lose me and said that if Tanner asked her to leave me, she'd go crazy. Isn't that sweet? She wouldn't stop seeing him for me, but she'd feel awkward if he asked her to stop seeming like me. I started making a fuss, Beth called, Sil, and she pissed me off, telling me that if I didn't let this happen, I'd lose her for good. Mel also told the son of a bitch what she had told me. Since I didn't leave her right away, she would now use her freedom to see him after work and on weekends, even though she swore she would be discreet and still love me. At this point, I didn't want to lose her, but felt helpless to stop this attachment without the nuclear option of divorce. She made an immediate appointment and wore a special gray miniskirt we had bought together while dating. When I objected that it was mine, she said she wanted to look good for him on her way out the door. I felt like I had lost her to an ex. I felt like never before when I walked into the bar. My friend Keith had had problems with adultery in the past, and he advised me to find Ed. He was the bartender. Upon entering the bar, I was out almost immediately. The establishment was moderately full. One woman laughed. It was a full and throaty laugh that reminded me of Melanie, and it certainly reminded me of what she was doing and probably laughing about now with Tanner. The hilarity contradicted my mood. However, Keith was adamant that I talk to Ed, so I tried not to cringe and walked towards the bar. Ed looked very traditional for a bartender. White shirt, black vest, and mustache. I almost looked for those stupid armbands you see in old black and white photos, but apparently he wasn't that obsessed. He glanced at me and then just shook his head. He grabbed a couple bottles from under the counter and started pouring. He placed a shot glass in front of me. Drink? I looked at him questioningly, but he only gestured to the glass. With excitement, I took a sip and immediately almost spit it out again. Oh my God, that was awful! I almost shouted, looking at him accusingly. I almost reached out to grab him by the vest and drive my fist into his face. But instead, I looked at the glass. What's this? He smirked. Yes, it's supposed to be. It's olive and onion juice with a little chili and bitters. I stared at him even more. Why would you do that? I'm not paying for this. It's on the house. But I made you angry, not scowling. You don't look like a beaten dog, and I'll bet you haven't spent the last 2 minutes thinking about anything. I wondered, and he was right. Of course, just acknowledging that fact brought it all back. But it was hard to focus on it when I wanted to run a grater over my tongue. I'm Ed. You look like you need to talk. Yes. It was hard to give the details of my cuckolded infidelity to a stranger, but Ed had an answer for that too. He poured 4 shots of alcohol. I checked to see what bottle he was doing it from. He only hummed that it was a good thing I could learn, and said he'd be back to chat when I'd finished them. I got through them pretty quickly and we started talking about innocuous things. My job, my car, what teams I like, etc. He pointed out a few pretty girls, and we didn't hesitate to make suitably masculine statements about their physical attributes. Standard male stuff. After a while, I got a pained look on my face. I wonder how many of them leave stupid husbands at home, said I bitterly. Bingo, said Ed. He got out and headed for the dark end of the bar. There he exchanged a few words with the customers. They smiled at him, quickly finished their drinks, and left. He came back. Why don't you have a seat over there? The night has just begun and people are thirsty. When things settle down, we can talk about it some more. So I did. He supported me in a professional manner to soften the edges of my grief without going over the edge of consciousness or falling into vulgarity. A couple times I wanted to get up and leave, but I remembered my promise to Keith. After a few hours, the last customers were leaving. Ed gestured to one of the waitresses and she sighed. Geez, Ed, do you ever close? I feel like your therapy sessions are just an excuse not to clean up. She smiled as she said this. Don't be rude to me, Reba, or I'll fire your ass. She rolled her eyes. Promises are promises. She served up a couple cups of coffee before she emptied the decanters and started setting things up in the back of the bar, leaving us alone. We started slowly. I started talking, saying only that my wife was cheating on me. Slowly, he started asking questions, quietly and calmly waiting for me to answer. I didn't really want to talk about it. In this day and age, it's humiliating to reveal that you're sitting there accepting the situation. I was just going to lay out the bare minimum of facts. However, a funny thing happened. I slowly but surely told Ed more and more. It didn't all come out in one fell swoop. No, it was like cutting out a boil. Every now and then he would ask questions, massage the wound, and then some more pus would come out. At some point, he would ask a question that would tear my heart out again. It's okay, sir. We're just cutting the wound a little deeper to get the last drops out. It won't hurt in the slightest. It was compassion that made me do it. There wasn't an ounce of pity or even sympathy in his facial expression. That would have made me instantly clam up. No, it was compassion. I was suffering, so he was suffering too. I could see that my words hurt him almost as much as they hurt me. A strange word for another human being, but I guess I'd learned a lot these days. I fell silent and just sat there, embarrassed. He sipped his coffee for a while. So, what do you want to happen out of all this? He asked delicately. I want none of this to happen at all. I want Melanie to come back. I wanted Tanner to be eaten alive by rabid dachshunds, but how do you tell that to a man you just met? I want my life back. Your wife? She's not depriving you of your fun? I shook my head. So, can you live with that? Accept the role of backup? He said softly. I visibly wrinkled my nose and shook my head vigorously. Good. At least you've got some self-respect. But you don't want to leave her? A final hesitation. If I just leave, he wins everything. But I've already lost. He won her. Bullshit, said Ed angrily. He didn't win anything. There was no contest. You fought to keep your wife. But your sister-in-law fought and is fighting you to let her sister do it. Tanner, of course, wants to keep entertaining a woman he doesn't have to pay for. And your wife, who should be fighting to keep the two of you together, is fighting on his side. You, my friend, are in the minority, and they are trying to get it into your head that this is all normal, that the wisest thing you can do is to accept her little affair. But why? Howled I. Yes, I howled. I'm ashamed to admit. Because your wife doesn't think she'll suffer any losses. Can I see her picture? Slowly, I pulled my wallet out of my pants and held it out to him, revealing the photo. Ah, yes. She's very pretty. Any man would want to spend time with her. No wonder. Unsurprising what? Bluntly I said. It's not surprising that she thinks she can do it. She thinks she won't feel any pain. that she's a package any man would want, and that you'd be a fool to throw her away. You need a plan to rid her of that delusion. But what if I lose her? Yes, I groaned again. I was starting to hate that I sounded like a big coward. Why did you marry her? Asked Ed, looking at me with a raised eyebrow. Because I love her. Because she's beautiful. Because we were really good together, emotionally. Because I liked the way she made me feel about myself. I answered as honestly as I could. Do you still love the way she made you feel about yourself? We stayed up late that night working out a plan. The next day, I found myself at home on my couch. I'd never had a bad hangover, but this hangover was giving me a massive headache. I wandered into the kitchen, my head pounding in sync with my pulse. Fractions, fractions, fractions. If I could count at this point, I would know how my pulse was beating. I remembered what Ed and I had discussed so late last night. Heck, I even had a notebook with some notes. This was a mistake. Part of the plan should have been to sneak up on her unnoticed. I quickly hid it under the file drawers in the bedroom and office. Next chapter. So, you want to keep it? Asked Ed again. I want to give it a try. I'm not giving up on this marriage. Good. That means you can't give her an ultimatum. She's made it clear that you can't ask her to give up that asshole Tanner, but he can ask her to give up you. If you give her that ultimatum, which frankly you've already done, albeit rather weakly, then even if she refuses him, she'll resent you for making her. And that will likely put an end to the relationship as thoroughly as her running off with that asshole. Likewise, you can't do something stupid like kill his cheating or even beat him up. But we'll talk about that later. So what should I do? We went a little deeper into our cups. Stay put and try to remind her of everything she likes about you. You have to make the choice very obvious to her. It could cost you, he warned. It's already cost me my marriage and my self-respect. How much money? Said I sullenly. Are you telling me to just stay with her, and when he's done entertaining her, for me to act like nothing happened? He frowned. Is that what you want? No. I want to win. Well, there's winning, and then there's winning. You stick around long enough for her to come around. Everyone makes mistakes. You're going to give her a chance to make the right choice. And if she makes the wrong choice? He saddened and shrugged. Then you can make a few of them too, knowing full well what's going on. And you give yourself time to prepare. Prepare? But he didn't say anything more on the subject. Next chapter. The first thing I did was stop by the stationery store. It was something I wanted to do for myself, not something I discussed with Ed. I was carrying a large year-at-a-glance calendar to the register when I passed a rack of pens. The colors caught my eye, and I glanced at the display case. Finalizing my choice, I picked up the red and blue Sharpies, paid, and left. Back at the apartment, I hung it in the bedroom as a study. It was mounted in the wall with washers and screws drilled through the heavy laminated paper and screwed into the studs. I was experiencing anger and didn't want it to just disappear. Plus, using the tools made me feel more masculine in some ways. Then, starting January 1st, I started marking each day with a little blue check mark in the corner of the day. This went on for quite a while, but it distracted me from the fact that Melanie still wasn't at the apartment, and she was at Tanner's having fun with him in the gray skirt I bought her. I mentally noted that little detail. When I got to July during lunch, which I foolishly let her go to with Tanner without knowing the history of their relationship, a relationship she was hiding, I started drawing little red X in the corner of the day. There was nothing special about them. But if you focused on the calendar, you could see a sea of blue, and then the red dots that became more and more frequent. Every time I thought or suspected she was with Tanner, the day became a cross. Finally, I got to the day. That horrible day when my wife, my favorite wife, told me she was cheating on me and wanted to keep cheating. I stared at it, and finally swiped a red Sharpie right across the calendar and into the drywall. Holy crap. So much for subtlety. Now I'm going to have to go back and replace everything. At this point, Ed and I were sipping foreign beers because we were in weird mental territory. Okay, it made sense at the time, but we were both half in the sack. I'm a little curious at what point she did that, said Ed slowly. We both spoke slowly, and Reba threw angry glances at us every now and then. What do you mean? Asked I with an owl-like look. You said she was having fun with him at lunch while you were at work. He took long lunches. I nodded. Yep, she was at home. That was during the summer. She's a school teacher, I prompted obligingly. And she told you at the end of August? More like in the middle, said I, not sure what he was getting at. And when does the school year start? He asked meaningfully. She came to me confessing her love and guilt, saying she respects me too much to keep cheating on me, but certainly not enough to stop making me a cuckold. My face must have gone pale, too, because Ed said, Ah, now you see it too. And I did see it. She told me this in August because the school year and her responsibilities were about to start. She wouldn't be able to go out with Tanner and have fun with him during lunches because she'd be busy at school teaching and babysitting during the lunch hour. I didn't know exactly where the bastard lived, but I doubted he lived close enough. And if she saw him after school, she was more than likely at risk of me coming home early and noticing her absence. I'm being played. She doesn't like me at all. My stomach filled with acid. Well, I'm not sure I'd go that far. At all is a strong word. But she's certainly conflicted and treats you badly. She seems to be making more of an effort to stay with you than she has in the past, if that means anything. She should be done with him or done with you, not torturing you over this half-on, half-off mess. Torture. Yeah, he'd hit it right on the mark. That's exactly how I felt. I was shaking with mad hope and crushing doubts about my manhood, her love, and our future. If she loves him so much, I was close to snapping again. Why doesn't she just leave? He sighed. Could be a lot of things. But if she really was his stalker back in the old days, then there must be some reason. See if you can guess. Next chapter. She came back from the weekend. It had been a tense few days after that. She didn't discuss it, although she tried to act normal. I watched a lot of TV and drank a few beers. I can't say that I tried to treat it warmly, but like Ed said, I tried really hard not to be an asshole. It would only push her away and hurt me. I needed to keep the moral high ground. If she wants to wallow in the mud, that's her decision. I had to show her how bad that decision was. She needed to feel the loss. Things were starting to get closer to normal, or at least the new normal. We were discussing chores, work, and what needed to be done around the house. Honey, she asked, have you seen my gray miniskirt? Why? I wanted to wash it and I can't find it in the laundry basket. She was carrying a large laundry basket. That's because I already took care of it. It's not in my closet. You really need to hang it up so it doesn't get wrinkled, she chided lightly. We were constantly teasing each other, criticizing how the other handled laundry, ironing, folding, where certain things went. A couple things. What drawer did you put it in? No, I put it in the trash can. I sipped my soft drink. Why did you throw away my skirt? She asked, starting to get angry. Because it wasn't your skirt. It was my skirt. You gave it away. And when I looked at it, it was all stained and dirty, and I never want to see it again. She stared at me for a while, covering her eyes with her hood. Is there anything else you want to throw away? She asked reproachfully. Not at the moment. I didn't take my eyes off the TV. I decided to lay a few more cards on the table. You said you'd be very careful, that it was just sex. That's all well and good, but I take discreet to mean top damn secret. If I find out that someone saw you with him, if I find out that you were walking with him in the park, I'm going to get a lawyer right away. I want that to be clear. You've made my place in your heart perfectly clear. She raised her hand to stop me, but I continued. Yes. You want to feed his ego and make him feel like a conqueror. It's so incredibly hurtful, I can't put it into words. So if you have any hope, any hope at all of us staying together, you're going to go to his house and have fun with him. And that's it. That's out of the question. If it's an affair, it's best to leave it at that. But if you start dating him and going out in public with him, it's over. Period. How often do you have fun during the week? Asked Ed suddenly, half emptying the bottle of vodka. Pardon me? Before Tanner or after? Never mind. He waved his hand for me to continue. I don't know. 3, 4, 5 times a week. And how long does it last? It's kind of personal. He just shook his head. Okay. About half an hour a day. A session? Sometimes 2 or 3 sessions a night. I remembered her telling me the day before yesterday that she'd spent 2 hours with Tanner. So 3 to 6 hours a week at best. Yeah. There are 168 hours in a week, so most of the relationship actually takes place outside of bed. You want to try to keep her. So you need to deny her the opportunity to have a non-sexual relationship with him. Give her an ultimatum. Yes, that does involve watching TV and having some talking. He shook his head. I know. And she'll probably have dinner and movies with him. There's nothing you can do about that. But she can't brag about her boyfriend. She can't share him with anyone. It's better if she sits in the same room with him. But she said she's been having fun with him almost daily for a month now. I hope the glamour passes soon for one or both of them. What if it doesn't? Or if she lies and starts dating him? I asked. He shrugged helplessly. Next chapter. She seemed to hesitate. Okay, if that's what it takes. That's pretty much all we're doing anyway, she said, twirling the knife in her hands. Why had she agreed to this so easily? That raised even more questions. She watched me for a few more minutes and left for the back room. She stayed there for a while. When she left, she went into her room, changed her clothes, and walked out the door. She didn't tell me where she was going, but I knew. She was going to Tanner's. I tiredly got up from my chair, went to my office, took a red pencil, and put a little red X in today's square. That was, as they say, the first salvo. I showed her the whip. Now it was time for the carrot. That's not quite accurate. My time away from work has been a mixture of carrot and stick. It was time to go shopping and take the initiative. For a change, she came home after work and immediately sat down on my couch. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. I promised to let you know where I was going and when, so I broke the agreement. She wrapped her arms around me and gave me a long, lingering kiss. Thank goodness I could taste the toothpaste. The deal. There was no deal. She did what she did against my wishes and justified it to herself. But now I could see that she wanted to continue telling me about something, so I decided to interrupt her conversation and lick it all off first. Yes, and I wanted to apologize too. Here. I pulled out a large gift bag. She sighed in surprise and opened it. Inside was the attaché case she had long ago pointed out as a potential birthday present. Since I was pretty thick with hints and innuendos about the gift, she had to be pretty blunt and tell me exactly what she wanted. I just want you to know that I appreciate you so much more than anyone else. And it's going to be a cold day in hell before I buy her any more clothes just so she can wear them on that ass. She notices what I'm working on. Wait a minute. It's not like it's your old laptop. No. My bad, I said with an indifferent look. Since you won't be around that much, I figured I needed something to distract me. I stared at her, daring her to make a single comment. I drove to Best Buy, bought one of the more expensive models, and put it on our card. She stared at me intently, and I could see a million comments swirling around in her brain. Well, he certainly looks handsome. She paused again, fighting herself. Well, you've been so good to Tanner. I guess I can't complain, right? No, you can't, I said bluntly. And I'm not a very good sport. I still want you to stop seeing him. She hesitated and pretended she hadn't heard. A very nice gif. So, what do you want for dinner? Oh, by the way. She started again. I interrupted her again. Here. I slipped an envelope into her hand. She blinked in surprise. What's this? Is there anything else in here? Oh, nothing much. These are the tickets I bought to see Blue Man Group at the theater this Friday. Mel stared at me, clearly shocked and conflicted. I wish you had warned me ahead of time. I already had plans for this Friday. She actually looked me in the eye when she said that. Next chapter. It's like I'm bribing my wife, I said glumly. Ed wrinkled his nose. Well, how many women do you see marrying bums off the street? Women need breadwinners, people who fulfill their needs. So you have to take care of plying her with wine and dinner, socializing with her, taking her out on dates, and making sure he can't do the same. He took a big sip and continued. Besides, if all your friends see you doing all this for her and things go wrong, he faltered, and I nodded. Twice that week I asked her out to dinner and dancing. Twice that week she told me she was going to move Tanner's ashes. Mostly she was only gone for a few hours. After all, these were work days, and she had a lot to do during the day. Every day after she returned, I would stop by the laundry room, and that outfit and those underwear would go in the trash. I don't think she noticed, at least not yet. Every time she came back, she acted a little guilty and didn't describe what she had done. I didn't pry for details. I just asked, "Did you go out with him?" And she always said, "No." That was enough. For now. The next afternoon, Melanie sat in front of a huge pile of papers on the kitchen table and hurriedly corrected them. As a school teacher, she had to bring home and correct a lot of homework. She had tests and lesson plans, and she had a busy week. When she saw me, she smiled and pulled back the chair next to her to pile everything up. Back in the good old days, curse her, it was the good old days, we would sit together and I would help her wade through them, making funny comments about her students and checking each other's math. It was one of our many bonding moments. I walked over to the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. Honey, I'm so glad you're here. I'm just swamped with work. I have 3 lesson plans to do and a test tomorrow, and I'm swamped with homework. From the look on her face, she didn't understand a thing. That was what we were doing. It was our work together, and it was putting me in a quandary. I liked helping her. I liked supporting her. It was one of those little things we shared together. But if I helped her, I'd make it easier for her to have fun with Tanner. Sorry, honey. I'm a little tired and I need to do something on the computer, I said regretfully. Babe, I could really use your help. I know, but I'm tired, and the reason you're behind has nothing to do with me. Wait a minute. You've taken me out twice this week. You're just as much to blame for that as I am. Frowning slightly, I considered this, then picked up the papers and stacked them in a stack. I separated a quarter of the stack. You're right. I'll do it in the office, and anytime you get behind, I'll be happy to help you. But only then. Can't you just sit here and do them? She asked sadly. Okay, I agreed, and did more than I offered. We had a good time, but the gargoyle looming over our marriage was on her mind, and I only gave in that one time. Friday came, and she dressed again in one of her best outfits. I sat reading a book as she walked through the living room. This is your last chance. Blue Man Group isn't coming until this weekend. I can promise you'll have a much better time with me than you did there. You'll get dinner and a show. She only smiled slyly. Yes, of course. Honey, I don't see why you don't just move the date to Saturday. I'm only going to sleep over tonight. I can't. I didn't go into detail as to why. Well, I already made that promise, so I made a mental note to draw a red X for tonight. She kissed me on the lips and walked out the door with a small overnight bag. Yes, I was seething with disappointment. But I didn't lose my temper. I had places to go and things to do. I woke up late the next morning, and to my surprise, Melanie graced me with her presence. I disentangled myself from the sheets. Her side of the bed was untouched, so she hadn't actually laid down with me. But she was making breakfast. I glanced at the clock. Late breakfast. I wandered into the bathroom to relieve my bladder a little, brush my fangs, and wash my face. As I was brushing my teeth, I heard our landline phone ring. I heard Melanie answer the call. She spoke cheerfully for a few moments, but then I heard a note of something in her voice, and her tone changed instantly. She quickly curtailed the conversation. I saw her in the mirror. She was looking at me with indescribable surprise. That was Abby. She said they had a great time with you at Blue Man Group last night. She paused. You didn't tell me you invited Abby and Ryan to go in pairs. No. I poured some shaving cream and started smearing it on my face. She wanted to know why I wasn't there. They were surprised when I wasn't there. You didn't tell them I was busy? No. I started running the Mach 3 razor over my skin. What did you tell them? She asked cautiously. I said you had other plans that you couldn't change. They couldn't make Saturday, so I left it at that. We had a great time. Damn it. I could have made a deal if you'd told me the whole story, instead of playing those sneaky tricks. Nice. Very nice. It wasn't enough to go on a date with your husband. It had to be your husband. And something else. It's no mean trick, and you had every opportunity to do the right thing and come with us. I didn't tell them until I showed them because I was hoping you'd have a freak out and reschedule your session. Tanner will be in town longer than the Blue Man Group. Mel was stunned by this. I guess so. But that still doesn't change the fact that you tricked me. Why didn't you cancel when I hadn't changed my mind? Why? You'd rather I stay home and cry because my wife cares more about having fun with some other guy than going out to hang out with her husband and friends? I'm sorry. I'm not wallowing in sadness. I had a great time. I lied. I spent most of the evening fending off well-intentioned questions and couldn't stop thinking about her at Tanner's house. I guess I was a better actor than I thought. Besides, it would ruin their evening too. How many lives do you want to ruin just to mess around? I asked. It was nonsense, but it sounded good in my head. She froze for a second, closed her eyes, and shuddered. You know what? I'm not going to worry about it because you're not going to let anyone find out about it. I won't let you do anything. And I kicked the bathroom door shut right in her face. Damn it, I scratched myself. Then I went into the shower and had a good cry. She got even more contemptuous. Next chapter. It was pretty chilly in the apartment all day Saturday. She didn't go anywhere, but she didn't talk to me either. Sometimes I wished we'd move to a bigger apartment. When the tension got too much, I'd take a few laps around the block. Sunday was different. She made breakfast again and acted much warmer with me. Little touches, little jokes, things that are characteristic of couples. I asked her out for a walk in the park and she agreed. Tanner wasn't mentioned, and I felt a little better. Later that evening, she cooked one of my favorite meals and asked if I could do the dishes. I agreed and heard her turn on the shower. I was just wiping off the last plate when I felt a puff of warm air near my ear. I've been neglecting you and I want to make up for it. Go take a shower and I'll be waiting. What was she thinking? I said no. At least Tanner is man enough. Her mouth suddenly folded into an O, and her face reflected shock. I walked into the living room and started removing magazines from the couch. She ran in after me. Honey, I said something stupid. Such a stupid thing. You have to forgive me. I was just... spoke without thinking. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I just can't. She tugged on my arm and snuggled against my back, making the work take twice as long. I finished and looked at the couch. Then I turned around and started walking back to the bedroom. Oh, thank you, thank you. Let me make it up to you. She mewled as I picked up a pillow and went to the closet for a spare blanket. You're being... She finally had the sense to close her mouth and just watch me walk away. I hate sleeping on the couch. It's narrow and cold. But it was better than sleeping next to her that night. The next week was surreal. I looked through the newspaper every day to find interesting places to hang out together. Museum, plays, dances, etc. And for the first 3 days, she agreed to everything. I mean the planetarium, for heaven's sake. I was just desperate to make sure we lived together as a couple. Every once in a while, she would take a phone call that she would answer, chat for a minute, and hang up. And then she would suddenly need to go to the bathroom or run to the store for something. I wondered if she thought she was fooling anyone. It was Thursday night when there was a sudden knock on the door. Melanie had gone to the store. I opened the door. Standing outside the door was a very pissed off Beth, her sister. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she said, pushing past me. "Good evening to you too, bitch." Melanie's not happy. She's feeling guilty, conflicted, and she's staying home. She's upset. She's trying to get him out of her head, but you keep acting like an asshole to her. Asshole? What an interesting description. And please tell me why, pray tell, is her sister encouraging her fun and telling me to get over it instead of cheering for her happy marriage? She looked at me intently. Then her face softened, but very unconvincingly. Look, we've been through this before. The last couple times, the relationship didn't end well. There was no... She was looking for a word. Closure. This time she's trying to work it all out. She doesn't want to leave you. I talked to her, and she's hysterical about the idea. But she needs, a room. She needs to put her demons to bed. The only thing that gets put to bed is her and that asshole. I opened the door. And you took sides, and you're not on mine. Don't call me with your offers again. Don't come here again unless your sister invites you. Don't worry, if she invites me, I won't get in the way. Her face contorted with anger. You're making a big mistake. She'll leave you because of this. My only mistake is that I let you talk me into this. Do you know what she's doing now? She asked angrily. Maybe I do. And the only thing sadder than that fact is your satisfaction that it's happening. Isn't that strange? She walked away, frustrated. Melanie came home a half hour after Beth left. I watched her with bags of stuff. Did you have fun, honey? I asked. Yes, it was a madhouse at the store. What was it like at Tanner's? Silence. I dropped in, but only for half an hour. I only hummed. We were back to lying through omission. I didn't believe her, but she still answered direct questions honestly. All week I've been a good wife. I've been thinking. Yeah? I was going to go to Tanner's Friday night. That's an interesting definition. Of what? Never mind. Do you want to go out Friday night? Just for one more night? I'm not sure. I just wanted to, I don't know, take the edge off. Take the edge off. Well, we can't get in the way of that. I said it with as much sarcasm as I was capable of. Fine, I'll make my own dinner and watch a movie or something. She threw me a sharp look. You're not going to call any of our friends, are you? No. Friday night came. She looked more cheerful than I'd seen her in the last week. Don't get me wrong. When we did things together, she seemed happy. But there was some extra liveliness in her step, a lightness of being that pierced my soul like a laser. True to her word, she made herself a light dinner, offering to cook it for me, but I declined. I offered to do the dishes later so she could get ready, and she readily accepted. I popped into the shared bathroom and cleaned myself up while she used the master bath. When she came out into the hallway, she looked absolutely ravishing. Her hair was styled in an updo. She was wearing a tight sleeveless top and a new tight miniskirt that I hadn't seen before. Interestingly, she was hiding her clothes from me. It was a small apartment. On her luscious legs were stockings and black-heeled shoes with a small gold metallic bow on the front. She was wearing a bolero jacket for the cooler weather. Inside me, everything was boiling. 1, she was so happy, and 2, she was spending way more energy on this jerk than she had on all of our dates. She headed for the door a little before 7 and was surprised when I joined her on the doorstep. We walked downstairs and headed towards the parking lot. Where are you going tonight? she asked. To Mitchell's Steakhouse, said I, getting in the car and putting the key in the ignition. It's a very expensive place. We've already spent so much money, she began to complain. That's you telling me. And it's even worse since I'm treating your parents. I closed the door. I was already backing out when a completely white Melanie fumbled behind my car, arms at her sides, trying in her heels and miniskirt to skip behind her before I pulled away. I can't describe the look of horror on her face. She quickly ran up and tapped on my window. I lowered it, slightly annoyed. You're just kidding, right? She asked desperately. No. We haven't seen them in a while, and I hate having dinner alone. That's why I invited them over when you'd already planned it. And what did you tell them? Nothing. I didn't say you were busy. I didn't even say you'd be there. Is that okay with you? I'm already running late. You told them I wouldn't be there? She almost shouted. No, I didn't think it would matter. You asshole. Calm down. The neighbors are watching. Do you want me to tell them why you can't come eat with them? You have to call them. You have to cancel the meeting. No, I don't have to do anything. It goes 3 ways. I'm going to dinner with your mom and dad. They're probably already there. The second option is for you to join us. As my wife, you're always excited about my plans. The third option is you can call your mom and cancel dinner. But she'll ask questions. The thought horrified her, and I had no idea why, though I could be sure I'd thought about it. Okay, come with me. I can't go like this. I look like a whore. No, you do, said I. She threw me a dagger look. Wasting no time, she pulled out her phone and started to stalk away from me towards the apartment. Hey, Mom, I'm sorry, but he's so late tonight, I heard her say as she started to run up the stairs towards us, bouncing as she went. I think someone forgot her clothes. Dinner didn't go too badly. The trip there was just icy. She wore one of her interview suits and changed her makeup to something much less evening. It took her every minute of the road to remake herself. At one point, while we were still seated, her phone rang and she jumped up as if she had been touched by live wires. She just reached over and muted it. And then she turned the phone off. I got a lot of covert looks from her. It was obvious that her mother picked up on her tension right away. She asked about her half a dozen times. I liked her parents. Wait, let me change that. Compared to how I felt about their slutty daughter and her sister, the slight tension of dealing with 2 people was a mere trifle. It was amusing. Every time the topic changed and I decided to start or ask a question, Mel would tense up, not knowing what I was going to say. More grist for the mill. It was obvious that, unlike their other daughter, Beth, they had no idea what she was doing, and she was terribly afraid I would tell them. Of course, the subject of grandchildren came up. We're not ready, I said, startling all 3 of them. While we were still young, I'd been on a childbearing kick from the start. He says there's been a problem at his job, and we want to make sure we're financially secure. Melanie tried to save herself. Of course, we listened to the old tales about how no one is financially ready for kids, and things sorted themselves out. I nodded and ordered another bottle of wine. At least the steaks were good. If the trip there had seemed cold to me, the drive back might have liquefied the carbon dioxide. How could you do this to me? She hissed as soon as we got in the car. She asked me all sorts of questions in the bathroom. I nodded. I told her we were going through a rough time. Well, at least you didn't have to lie. That pretty much ended the conversation. When we got home, she ran into the house, and within 5 minutes, she was outside with a bag. I'll go and entertain him, she growled to me as she passed me on the steps and left. Next chapter. It was business as usual at Ed's place. I'd gone in there a couple times when Mel was having fun with Tanner, just to connect with him, to consult and get moral support. The atmosphere of the place appealed to me, and I wasn't as depressed as I used to be. Knowing that someone was on my side, that I wasn't alone, made a difference. Ed set the gin and tonic in front of me, which I sipped gingerly before taking a drink. He only grinned. How are things on the home front? Her parents don't know. I'm not sure if it's because she's cheating on me or if it's because she's cheating on me with Tanner, but she was horrified that I'm having dinner with them tonight. He wiped his glass with a napkin. And what does that get you? He asked, watching me closely. I sighed. Nothing. If I have to blackmail her into being a good wife, then the marriage is already dead, and I might as well take the papers today. I sipped from my glass. But isn't that what I'm doing now? The bartender frowned slightly. It looks like it, but there's a difference. You're just putting her on notice of the natural consequences if and when it comes to light. You're not so much threatening her with exposure as you are making her uncomfortable with her own lies. She doesn't think I have the courage to expose her and kick her worthless ass out. But she doesn't want it to be known. Ed wrinkled his nose. Well, that's something else for you to ponder. I nodded, finished my drink, and left. I was surprised as hell to wake up and see Mel. The drink must have had a stronger effect on me than I thought. I double-checked to make sure it was really Mel. Isn't that sad? Ed! She looked up at me with a smile on her face and a hint of regret. I'm sorry about what I said yesterday. You just... I saw the flash of anger leave a mark on her face. Caught me off guard, that's all. You keep making things harder than they need to be. I want to try and fix things. Make them the way they used to be. Can we fix things? Have we screwed things up so badly that we can't fix anything anymore? Maybe. I paused. It was easier if I didn't look at her. I've planned a trip to Memphis for next weekend. You and me, nice hotel just off Beale Street. Barbecue, live music, steamboat ride. Sounds wonderful. Honey, can we afford it? Probably not. She tensed for a moment, then pressed a little closer to him. Okay, let's do this. When are we leaving? I'll drive you to work Friday morning and pick you up after school. It was a good day. She made breakfast again and did a load of laundry. She'd been paying more attention to it lately, probably because she'd lost half her clothes. I canceled her Victoria's Secrets card, but she didn't say a word. Lunch passed in silence, and I decided to wander around changing the oil in our cars so there would be something to do. I had a lot to think about. She hadn't said a word about Tanner after this morning's revelations, and I didn't want to ask. Finished, I showered and thought about it. She hadn't made any promises. Was it something to do with her parents? Guilt? Regret? Love? Finished, I approached her in the kitchen. She was starting to make dinner. Why don't we just grab a couple of hot dogs at the movie theater? I suggested. What? She looked at me hopefully. Why don't we go to the movies? Let's go on another date. That chick flick thriller you wanted to see came out last week, and we haven't had a chance to go yet. She smiled after a brief hesitation. Good. It'll save me from doing the dishes. The movie was just as you'd expect. There was a ghost, a murder, and an unhappy wife. A movie about revelations and knowledge about people. Even before the second reel started, it was clear that the husband had done it. This movie was also a revelation for me. In one scene, the wife on the screen walked to a closet that reflected the room behind her. She opened it and took out a small box. When she closed it, the glass reflected an obviously dead woman. The director hadn't turned on any music leading up to this shot, so it was a complete surprise. Melanie didn't jump. I'm sure there are many explanations for this, but I chose the simplest one. I was tired of grasping at straws. She approached me in bed that night, and I pushed her away. It's a little early for me. She looked sad. Let me know when you're ready. I rolled over and fell soundly asleep. Memphis turned out to be everything I'd hoped it would be. Not exactly a tourist mecca, but the food was good. Beale Street had a lovely pedestrian alley with bars up and down the street where you could always get a drink and some company. The music was phenomenal. Everything would have been perfect, except I wanted to go with someone. Friday afternoon, I carefully loaded my stuff and drove to the airport, completely neglecting to stop by the school first. It might have seemed like a small thing, but strangely enough, I didn't care. To avoid wasting money, I turned off my cell phone so I could enjoy the ride without any distractions. Still, by Sunday morning I was feeling somewhat guilty, so I changed my flight to an earlier one, using one of Mel's credit cards to pay the fee. When I got home, I turned on my cell phone and noted that I only had 6 messages. Back at the apartment, I found her filing her nails on the couch. She glared at me as I stowed my things in the kitchen. How could you do this to me? I had to call a cab. At work. Do you know how embarrassed I was? I can hazard a guess. No, you can't. I was so glad we could be reunited. I was looking forward to this trip. And then you never showed up. You mean I ran off to have fun on my own with no regard for the fact that it might hurt you? Yeah, I have no idea what that feels like. And she looked like I'd punched her in the face and then flushed with anger. Why are you being so difficult about this? I told you I was getting rid of it. No, you were putting him into your system. You've had a lot more fun with him than you've had with me, and I know you've been seeing him and going on dates. Her eyes darted back and forth. What are you talking about? About that movie. It was a thriller and you didn't jump up once in the scary scenes. Not once. Why? She switched to another topic. You're changing the subject. Why are you trying to drive me into Tanner's arms? I think if you didn't want to lose me, you'd treat me with more respect. I stared at her for all of 5 seconds. Then I laughed in her face contorted in bewilderment. You want to lose me? My face kind of grinned. I wasn't sure of my expression. Lose you? You know, for a while I thought I was losing you to Tanner. That guy was beating out my time as a partner. But you know what? I was wrong. I tried to put my thoughts into words. The Greeks used that little garland to signify victory, and the only person who can put it on your head is your partner. So I never lost to Tanner. I never fought Tanner. I fought you. You ripped that wreath off my head and decided to put it on his. And that tells me everything I need to know about our relationship. She began. Leave it alone. I grinned. Yes, I was definitely grinning at this point. Then I snapped my fingers in a dismissive gesture. Go on. Run to him. Because I've been thinking a lot about what you said to me. If everything you said is true, then I have nothing to worry about. If Tanner wanted to marry you, he would have gotten you a long time ago. He doesn't. He's had every chance. Your first relationship, your second affair, and now this one. So I can worry about you running off with Tanner. But I don't have to worry about him taking you. He just wants to have fun. I'm sure he's really turned on by the fact that he comes along and ruins your relationship, and you're obviously stupid enough to let it happen. Her face turned ashy, and her mouth opened and closed several times. You don't know what you're talking about, she finally squeezed out. Of course not. I turned around and picked up my beer. As I stood back up, I heard the rustle of fabric, the jingle of keys she hurriedly grabbed, the swiping of her purse off the counter, and the slamming of the front door. I sighed, like a dog returning to its vomit. I'd had plenty of time to think about everything she'd said and how she'd acted with Tanner. Every time he came into her life, she'd drop everything and run off to be his whore. And then he'd leave. That thought stuck in my head. She never left him. Muttering a curse, I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door. Even on a Sunday afternoon, Ed's place was packed. The jukebox was playing tunes, and the man was sitting behind the bar, talking quietly to a couple of customers. He interrupted when he saw that I was so upset and headed over to the waitress stand to greet me. I was seething with rage. "What's up?" was all he could manage to mutter before I reached out and grabbed his stupid black vest in my hands, half dragging it over the counter. You knew. You knew from the beginning. I almost yelled at him. As my words echoed out, I realized that the bar had grown quiet, except for the music coming from the jukebox, and the distinct sound of many chairs being pushed away from the tables. The hair on the back of my neck stood up on its own as I felt a huge figure looming behind me. "Everyone calm down," said Ed softly. "My man is not having a good day today." I slowly let go of him and stretched my arms out in front of me, making it clear that I didn't want any trouble, especially in the wholesale quantities that the patrons seemed ready to dump on me. Ed looked over at Reba, who was in the process of putting the bottle back on the shelf. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph! You were going to hit him with a bottle of Glenfiddich? He's not such a good customer. He's going to get the stick. If you're going to hit someone with a bottle, hit that rowdy Lenny. He keeps the joint afloat." A trill of laughter came from the crowd, and things seemed to calm down. I no longer felt that I was going to be unceremoniously thrown out into the alley, more or less unharmed. He looked me over and invited me into a dark corner. He placed a glass in front of me. "Care to enlighten me as to what that was?" he asked cautiously. He was annoyed, and I can't say I blame him, but I was still upset myself. "You knew," I said in a barely restrained whisper. "You knew he always left her behind. You should have seen it. You guessed about the school. You knew she wasn't going to—" I felt like crying again. Not for Melanie, but for the cherished dream I'd lost. The time before Tanner. What could have been? What I wanted to be again? Somehow in the last few weeks it was no longer about Melanie the person, but about wanting to find the dream again. Melanie the idea. Ed sighed and rubbed the top of the bar with a rag nervously. "I'm afraid I haven't been honest with you. It was never about you two making up. I knew it was a pipe dream." "Then what was it about?" I asked bitterly. "It was about getting you to the point where you could move on with your life. This, elections, these tricks. I wanted you to have a metric, a way of counting things. Every time she chose to leave, every time she chose not to be with you, I knew it would help you figure out what you needed to do. I never had any hope for your marriage, not listening to you. But maybe I could have helped. By making her choice so obvious, I didn't let you tease yourself with false hopes when she fooled you with half promises and assurances. Then why didn't you just tell me to divorce her? Would you have divorced her?" I thought about my reasoning a few weeks ago. "No," I admitted glumly. "But you helped Keith's marriage." I almost howled again, but I'm proud to say it didn't come to that. Keith's wife had a brief three-way affair with a coworker. Yes, she did wrong, but she felt guilty, and he was competing with a real person. This wasn't a months-long secret affair with a longtime lover. How do you compete with a dream? How do you blame someone who has no remorse? I took the glass and exhaled slowly. "She's a drug addict," I said. Ed nodded sagely. "If you look at it like Tanner is a drug, it all makes sense. The sneaking around, the choices she made, the lying when the pressure started to get to her. But how can someone become addicted to another person? Is he that good in bed?" I asked. Ed shrugged. "I guess he's pretty good. But there was this scientist named Lorenz. He worked with baby geese. He incubated some eggs, and they imprinted on him instead of the geese. They treated him like he was their mother, simply because he was the first one they saw. I suppose Tanner was her first, and she reacts a little violently. I'm not versed enough in psychology to understand exactly what's going on, but she seems to be addicted. So what am I supposed to do now? What happened?" And I explained to him what happened. "So she ran off to Tanner's." I nodded. "But it's not entirely unexpected. She made that clear." "But now you know that it was always her choice. And only she could have made it. Not Tanner, not Beth. You didn't fight Tanner, you fought her. And how can you win that fight?" Sadly, I just shook my head. I stayed for another hour or so. Ed and a few of the guys sympathized with me, and I felt like it was over. Pulling into our parking lot, I was surprised to see her car parked there. I frowned. This was unexpected. What was even more unexpected was that the crying, black-haired girl wrapped her arms around my waist and held me like her life depended on it. It was... He... He, I went there, whimpering, 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 and he said to call, but I didn't because stream of tears. If you're having a hard time keeping track of it all, you'll sympathize with what I went through trying to make sense of her sobs, gurgling noises, and the fact that she was pressing her face into my collar as she said all of this. Eventually, I managed to calm her down enough that she was able to hold a semi-rational conversation. I was so mad at you for saying that. Anyway, I got there and he wasn't expecting me because I was supposed to go to Memphis with you, and it was too humiliating to tell him that you... Get back on track, I said curtly. You took me there. I let that slide past my ears to find out what this was all about. And I went to his house because he's a guy who doesn't have to lock his door. And, yeah? I was getting bored already. And Bet was there having fun with him. She started wailing some more. I pressed my lips together and nodded understandingly. So that was her point. What? She looked up at me from her tissues. I was wondering why she was so insistent on talking you into entertaining him. Why she was trying to get me to roll over. What? She repeated. Had she always been so stupid? Or was I just now noticing it, blinded by her good looks? I mean, he probably entertained her first, and she should have given him your digits since you two have such a history. I guess if she wanted Tanner, she should have stepped in for you. Why would she do that? She knows he's me. She clenched her jaws. I threw her a look full of disgust. I guess someone couldn't shut their goddamn mouth about him being perfect, and good old sis decided to give it a try. She was clearly devastated by this, and I tried to elicit even a glimmer of sympathy from her, but I couldn't raise a spark. And? I pressed. She looked down at her hands resting in her lap. And nothing. Really? A guy like that, the kind of guy who tells you how he's giving me horns and making you buy hot outfits for him with my money, he didn't have any smart suggestions? She glowed beet-colored. He, he, she wailed again. I knew what was in store for me, and I wasn't disappointed. Honey, we can fix this. I just can't look at them anymore. He betrayed me so horribly. But we're still good. You can still have me. Honey? Next chapter. I snuck over to the bar. Yes, I did. Deal with it. Ed already had my drink. Now I was a regular, though I wasn't turning into an alcoholic. I came for the socializing. As I packed, I took down the wall calendar and stuck a legend on it. Blue checkmark. Faithful wife, Red Cross, Tanner's whore, and mailed it to her family. She needed help, but not from me. Shortly afterward, her parents invited me over for dinner. They were saddened rather than angry, though when the rage came out, it was oddly not at me for upsetting their little girl. Apparently, Melanie had first picked up Tanner back in high school, and he'd used her, living in her apartment and being such a bad influence on her that she'd struggled with her studies for a couple years. When he got a job and left, she tried to chase him halfway across the country using her parents' credit cards. It wasn't just our relationship she neglected because of him. The second time, she was engaged until she left her fiancé for 3 days with Tanner, acting like a whore in public. And then he just walked away, leaving her heartbroken and alone. Most of all, they were disappointed in Beth. She knew how vulnerable her sister was, and throwing Tanner around her neck like that was reprehensible. I had a feeling that reconciliation with them and their parents was going to be a long time coming. They shook my hand, hugged me, and wished me well. There was no doubt about what I would do. The only thing that surprised them was how patient I was with their daughter. She doesn't deserve you, her own mother said. You can't think of a worse criticism from your own kinfolk. 3 times she'd had the chance to confront her hormones and not take the cruel piece of shit, and 3 times she'd failed. I've been patient. Everyone makes mistakes, but she seemed to keep making them, and I wasn't going to be the one filling in for myself while Tanner was in town. I wasn't losing to Tanner. She was losing. And speaking of Tanner, I turned to Ed to provide me with an alibi. He flatly refused. You can't do that? Why not? Because it's bad for your soul. I pondered this for a moment. All in all, I'm a pretty good person. I think I'll risk tarnishing myself a little. He looked at me. Revenge doesn't do any good. Justice, on the other hand, is another matter. It seems that once he knew the details of my little problem, he took a couple of his patients/patrons/friends, the distinctions are really blurred at this point, and they did a little research. Turns out that Mr. Tanner, in addition to being perfect for rather feeble-minded women, was also a civilian contractor for the local military base. They were responsible for remodeling the entire IT structure in some of the buildings, and surprise, surprise, they were way behind schedule. Jim, who worked on the base, thought this was a suspicious embarrassment and discussed the matter with the Waste and Abuse Office. Long lunches are not considered a crime in the Army, except when people start paying attention. Suddenly, soldiers and other civilian contractors were being asked a lot of questions. The atmosphere began to tighten up. People had to work harder and explain themselves more. This caused an uproar on the job, and because Mr. Tanner's abuses were mentioned by name and he bragged about his midday entertainment, co-workers accused him of ruining a good job. Ed talked to the congressman whose son he had helped get into an unpleasant relationship, and the congressman talked to the base commander. The company was put on notice. Tanner's name was mentioned prominently. Hank, a trucker, stopped by the town Tanner had originally moved from. Since he was here temporarily, he decided to look around. Apparently, Tanner had a steady girlfriend there with whom he was very serious. So much so that he was visiting her on a monthly basis. From what I understood, Hank decided to tell a couple strangers at the coffee shop that this bastard named Tanner was entertaining girls left and right at his job in Columbus. That his girlfriend happened to be at the table next to him was pure coincidence. Judging by her comments and Hank's questioning, she possessed a far less malleable and long-suffering character than Melanie. "So that's it?" I asked Ed. "In exchange for my marriage, he might lose his job and his girlfriend? Seems like a pretty bad trade-off for my marriage to me." Ed shrugged. "I understand how you feel, but we're doing what we can do, not what we'd like to do. And karma knows how to handle the Tanners. Besides, it wasn't just him." I nodded. Melanie had her own karma. She hadn't taken the divorce well, and it was even worse when she found out how much debt we'd accumulated. It seems, as with adultery, if your partner accepts your purchases, they should be used equally, and barring some cash advances she didn't know about, we now had a lot of debt. My job had a lot of potential for growth. A teacher? Not so much. Psychologically, she was a wreck too. When Tanner left almost overnight and almost simultaneously with me, she didn't take it well, if the hospital insurance claims were to be believed. I'd like to believe it was because I'd abandoned her, but I was no longer prone to self-delusion. Since her parents had practically disowned her after she foolishly left her marriage for Tanner, she had to move in with her sister. I wished them the mutual recriminations they deserved. As for me, I got over Melanie pretty quickly. I took my time dating a girl named Tess, but you can be sure we talked a lot about our exes. Epilogue. I finished my drink and decided it was time for a snack. Tess was busy today and I was a deer. After eating, I decided to go to the movies. I was in line to get my ticket when I saw him. It was a guy with a lost expression on his face. He was wearing a wedding ring, but he came to the movie alone. The traces of self-loathing were all too familiar. I walked up to him. "Hi, you don't know me, but I do know you. I used to be you. You look like you could use a drink. Why don't we ditch these stupid movie tickets and go see a guy I know? His name is Ed." The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.